Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here. I'm going to be going over the update 3.0 notes, the hero and item changes only, so hopefully you guys will get a little bit of insight into some of the changes that took place. Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to be going over the 3.0 hero and item changes. I would have done this yesterday, but I was traveling back from San Francisco where I was at the 5v5 pre-launch party, and then I had to cast some Rainbow Six last night, so couldn't quite get the video out. I hope you guys have been enjoying the 60-second guides as well. Please let me know if you find them interesting. What I'm aiming to do with the 60-second guides is get other VG content creators involved, so we share an episode, just to allow you guys to see all the different content creators that are out there. I had one with Flash, I've had one with Munchables, I've got plans to do one with Rumbly, I've got people like Iraqi Zorro, I've got Physics, the Cloud9 old analyst to go and do some stuff with me, so hopefully you guys will get to see lots of different people in the Vainglory community through those 60-second guides, and hopefully in the 60 seconds, even though they're not actually 60 seconds, you guys will actually learn a little bit about a hero as well. So I'm hoping they're doing well, and I hope you guys enjoy them. Let's start with the hero changes, because obviously this is a shorter set of update notes. If you want the full update notes, I will link the other update note link in the description below, simply because that is an update notes that are full of like all of the damage and the healing and the respawn timers, all that kind of stuff. All the information in hard stats about 5v5 is in the other set of update notes. Massive update notes. I'm not going to go through it. You guys can read through it in your own time. We're here about the hero and item changes. Let's start with Baron. So what Nivmet said is that he wanted to try and open up Baron's build paths, and what he's done is he's nerfed Baron's base attack speed, but increased the amount of attack speed that Baron gets when building attack speed items. What this has really done to Baron is it means you can no longer go like Sorrowblade, Tension Bow, Double Tyrant's Monocle, which was a pretty popular build for Baron a couple of updates ago. You're now probably going to have to fit in something like a Tornado Trigger. You might have to fit in something like a Breaking Point, and if you're the only weapon power carry, it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility to go a Poison Shiv or a Bone Saw. So, you know, it seems now that, especially if you're going to go critical strike orientated Baron, you have to fit in a Tornado Trigger there at some point. But it just means that Baron now has the options to go for attack speed items. And when I say options, I mean he actually has to get an attack speed item, pretty much. You can play Baron off the back of a jump into double basic attack looking to burst someone. Because Baron's overall damage got nerfed a couple of updates ago, that doesn't work as well now. So playing a sustained fight Baron is probably going to be better, which means you're going to have to weave some attack speed in there somewhere down the line. The Grace Retribution heroic perk has been nerfed. Basically what happens is that every time Grace basic attacks, she resets the cooldown on her abilities by 1.5 seconds. That's been dropped to 1.2, that's a 0.3, which those of you that are good at maths will know that's 20%. So she's had a 20% nerf to her heroic perk timer. Those of you that are mediocre at Grace and don't use that heroic perk to the maximum efficiency will notice a small change. Those of you that are very, very good at using Grace will notice that there is a pretty decent change, but regardless of what happens, she's still strong. Grace is still in a great position right now. I don't think this is going to hit her as hard as it maybe was supposed to, and I think she's still going to be a very, very good captain and potentially even weapon power jungler in 5v5. Gwen had been kind of rising up. She had a big range buff in the last update, which made her a little bit more viable. And what they've done now is they've increased the weapon power ratio on her heroic perk, and they've reduced the time it takes to actually get one of those hits. She's going to become more of a lane bully now, especially. Tension Bow Gwen is very much back on the cards. This is going to make her hit a little bit harder off the Tension Bow spike. But even with Sorrowblade, she's going to hit harder as well, because, you know, 1% of Sorrowblade is 1.5 times by 5. She's going to be hitting, you know, something like 7.5 damage extra when she gets a Sorrowblade, which actually is pretty solid. It might not seem like it, but that's a pretty decent change. So Gwen is definitely going to spike harder with her first item now, and she's going to be a definite lane bully. And the problem was with 5v5, it was really CP Gwen or bust. This is going to make weapon power Gwen definitely more of a side lane bully, or potentially even a counter to a mid lane mage that you can look to bully them after the first item spike. So Gwen definitely a good lane bully now. Idris. Spiking, basically, they were worried that he was spiking in the mid-game too hard. They wanted him to be that true scaling hypercarry. Like, CP Idris is supposed to be a late-game scaling sort of mage hypercarry. So what they've done is they've nerfed the basic crystal power per attack and sort of put that onto the level. So he's going to be much harder hitting in the later game and will not spike as easily off 2 items in the mid-game, because CP Idris could spike off alternating current plus whatever sort of CP item that you chose. Most people went for Shatterglass, for instance. Some people went for Frostburn, but he spiked really hard off just 2 items. I think now he's going to need 3 items to get to that full spike, and we're going to start to see a more late game CP Idris, but he will hit harder in the late game. You might see, if you see any CP Idris with 4 items now, he's going to start to hit very, very hard. My favourite hero on 5v5 got a very slight buff. I've always seen Jewel as a split pusher in 5v5. Thunderstrike is a really good ability to take down turrets. If you build Sorrowblade into double Tyrant's Monocle or Sorrowblade Tornado Trigger Tyrant's Monocle, depending on how you want to play it. She's very, very good at pushing waves. She's good at clearing waves when under pressure with her big red button, even on the weapon power build, and she takes turrets like a storm. So Jewel, I think, is a really good split pusher in this game, and they've made it so that when you overdrive Thunderstrike at level 8, you actually have a 0.5 second cooldown decrease, plus any attack speed that you get that's going to decrease it slightly more. I think it's a great change for Jewel. I think Jewel's going to be very good. She's going to spike harder at level 8 now, and off Sorrowblade and a Tornado Trigger or Sorrowblade and a Tyrant's Monocle, she's going to be able to duel at level 8 a lot better as well. So good change for Jewel. And she's going to be a pretty solid split pusher in 5v5 to come. This is reverting some of the changes that we saw to CP Kestrel quite a while ago. Basically, Weapon Power Kestrel and CP Kestrel were good until a couple of updates ago. Then Weapon Power Kestrel fell off, and CP Kestrel had been nerfed quite frequently, until the point where, unless you were a main at CP Kestrel, you weren't really getting much work done. This is definitely going to make CP Kestrel a bit better. It's going to make CP Kestrel a bit better in the jungle as well, specifically as CP Kestrel classically has always been a jungler. And the flat base damage increase on her splash damage is definitely going to be a bit more forgiving for those of you that aren't going to snowball with her, because she was very much used to be a snowball hero. Don't think this makes CP Kestrel super viable, but it definitely makes her stronger, especially, and maybe even makes her viable in the lane, because her splash damage is pretty good for pushing waves. So CP Kestrel, not a bad position off this. Koshka needed nerfs. Before we even got to Koshka needed nerfs. So this is what I was talking to Nivmet about at the lair. I actually mentioned to Nivmet, make her more reliant on her heroic perk, decrease her overall movement speed. She's way too quick. And it looks like they did. So they decreased her overall movement speed. Now makes her more reliant on using her heroic perk, which, you know, a good Koshka player can do. You can utilize that heroic perk and then run to lane, use the minions to activate the heroic perk to get a gank off. So without just, now she was just too quick before. Now you've got to use that heroic perk to be a bit more nimble on your feet. And Twirly Death was just doing way too much damage, just even with an Aftershock spike. What they've done here is basically said, Aftershock spike, don't want it to hit as hard, but if you invest more into some CP, then you can make that up with the 5% CP increase we've got. It just means that Koshka's not going to 2-shot you when she gets an Aftershock. She might 3-shot you still, but, you know, most of us know that Koshka, when she hits that Aftershock spike, was just crushing everybody. So this is basically tuning down her Aftershock spike, which means she's not going to hit as hard when she gets it. But if she invests in a bit more CP following, then she'll get that rise back up. So it's going to move her spike a little bit later in the game. Still going to hit hard, but just a little bit later in the game. Cooldown decrease on From Hell's Heart. Yeah, basically in 2.12, the stun duration got nerfed and Cruel was feeling a bit sad. So cut off 5 seconds at every rank. It's not a huge deal. Not enough to make Cruel any worse or better than he was. A little bit better, obviously, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. This is an interesting change, because being a Lance main myself, like, I really like Lance. This was a really interesting one. Max stamina per energy increase from 20% to 30%, meaning that if you go down a CP build path, or you're forced to build items that involve kind of energy regeneration in the captain build path, you're going to get some effect from it, which is great. Root duration gone up by 0.1%, and damage reduction gone from 15 to 20%. So if you saw Quatrevoir, he did a video where he did unkillable CP Lance. People will say CP Lance is viable. I think CP Lance is fun. I think if you play CP Lance, you are taking up a spot on the team that could have been used for an actual CP carry. CP Lance is not super viable. Like, he's okay. He's a decent carry. He requires certain items to make him work. But this does mean that if you choose to invest in something like an Aftershock or a Shatterglass, You could play Hybrid Lance, Tension Bow, Aftershock. I see that quite a lot. You could build a Shatterglass as a Captain Lance. You're going to get a bit more effect from those kind of items. Full CP Lance he's okay, but he's not going to be a carry that's going to carry you like crazy. Full CP Lance is just strictly worse than a lot of other CP carries in the game. Only if you're looking to play a super heavy protect composition where CP Lance is going to provide another front line for a hyper carry like, I don't know, CP Idris or Baron, for instance. That's the only reason I'd consider playing CP Lance. But CP Lance itself is not good compared to a lot of other CP carries that could take his position. But this is good for those of you that might want to diversify your build path in a captain role, or maybe want to go like a hybrid on-hit build path with Tension Bow and Aftershock. Well, if anyone watched the Invitational, you'll know that Lorelei isn't dry. Lorelei's pretty gosh darn good as a split push. CP Lorelei as a split pusher, by the way, is sleeper. If you guys at home want to play some 5v5 and are struggling to find a carry to go into top lane, or struggling to find a carry to take to bot lane, CP Lorelei is bloody brilliant. She's so good at pushing waves with her A. She has got great dueling potential in the lane with great control of the lane using her splashdown and her pools. And she's very hard to trade into when she's buffing her basic attacks by standing on those pools. So yeah, Lorelei's in a good position. Now she's even in a better position. I didn't think Lorelei needed a buff. I think she's very strong. This might help Captain Lorelei's a bit though, but the CP Lorelei in the side lane's super good right now. Let's have a look at Lyra. Health ratio, I mean, Lyra was healing like awful in the last update. And they really gutted her Bright Bulwark with the changes that meant that you can use movement skills inside. You just can't cross the barrier. Because it meant that, you know, she was so good at countering people like Vox, people at countering people like Sky. Because what you could used to be able to do with Lyra is you could portal on top of them and use the Bright Bulwark as a way to engage a fight, because Sky couldn't Suri Strike, Vox couldn't use Sonic Zoom. The problem is that the way that they changed Bright Bulwark is they've made Lyra a defensive captain, because it's about crossing the barrier. So it's about stopping glaive afterburns, it's about stopping people getting past that barrier to your allies, which I think is okay for 5v5, because maybe Lyra needs to take on more of a protective role. But I love that diversity that Lyra had, where you could portal, then use Bright Bulwark to shut down hypermobile carries. And now, with that, they can still use movement skills inside Bright Bulwark. If a good player will just position to the edge of the Bulwark and then just walk out and be safe. So she doesn't quite have the same aggressive impact, but she's still a pretty good defensive hero if used correctly. And these are all defensive changes to Lyra, making her defensive capabilities a bit better. She definitely needed a buff to her healing, and they've slightly increased the slow and the slow duration on Bright Bulwark, which is going to compensate a little bit. But Lyra is definitely now more of a defensive hero. Like, people used to pick Lyra as like an all-in portal composition, and that still works to an extent, but not the same level that it used to, especially on 5v5, where it's going to be harder to pull that off. Ozo's healing's gone down, but damage has gone up. That's kind of a straight trade-off, really. There's not much you can say about it. Ozo's still going to be Ozo. He's good for certain situations, and Ozo one-tricks, like Humanist. Reza. I don't think Reza needed a buff, personally. Essentially, I think Reza was one of the best 5v5 heroes in the game right now, because, essentially, I explained this because we saw Fuji playing it at the 5v5 pre-launch. When you have 5v5, you have a backline that was so easily threatened in 3v3. So Reza was really good in 3v3, but his utility compared to other heroes that could gap close wasn't accentuated. In 5v5, you have so many barriers to cross to get to the backline that you need a hero with exceptional mobility. Suddenly Alpha, Glaive, they don't cut it because they can't get through all of those layers of protection. Reza has got so many forms of gap closer and dashing that he makes him so valuable at trading at least 1-for-1 versus a very, very high priority target in the backline of the enemy team. This has just made it even more easy for Reza to achieve that. Reza is a great hero in 5v5 right now, right at the top of my tier list. So Reza's good. Yeah, this is like my favorite change of the entire update. Saw was obnoxious, like, on the last update. That range increase was definitely not warranted, and the slight buff nerf to his base health in the late game. I don't think the base health in the late game was a major issue. It was mainly this range issue. That was the thing that kind of made Saw awful to play against. Like, those of you that have played in lane against a Saw, especially when he's being babysat by a captain in a side lane, know that it is just so ridiculously difficult to play against a Saw who is just pushing your lane and is very good at basic attacking you as well. I still think Saw is going to be a solid side lane pick, but definitely not going to be that lane bully that he was with that 2 range nerf. I think that was totally warranted. Change will allow goop to burn longer, stronger, and more frequently. Considering in the last update they made goop the lesser the focal point and made the Spitfire the focal point, and now they've made goop, or put goop back to almost where it was. Scarf seems super good right now. Like mid lane Scarf, I think he's going to be in a great position. They basically, what they did is in the last, you had B and you had A on Scarf. B was always the ability that you focused around with Scarf. Like, yeah, you could poke with A, but B was like what you shoved under a turret, right? They then made A more of the focal point by making the cooldown consistent across levels. And then they were like, oh, wait, let's make B better again. I don't think it's a bad thing. I love Scarf as a hero. This definitely feels like he's going to be oppressive, especially when sieging turrets again. So we'll have to keep an eye on Scarf, but I think he's probably going to be in a good spot. Again, another reversal of Skye's Suri Strike. Basically, they were like, maybe nerfing the Suri Strike was too hard because she relies on it for mobility. I agree. So Skye's back to where she was. Solid position like she was in usual. Yeah, good. Taka, I hate Taka. It always felt bad when you do damage to attacker, he goes into Kaku with high amount of CP and then regens all of his HP. So this is a needed nerf. If anything, I'd make that 10%. Like, I think that Kaku is just such an... it's already a really good ability to get you out of a sticky situation, but it shouldn't heal you for like 3/4 of your HP using it on like a really low cooldown as well. So I would be not surprised to see that go even lower in the future. Taka's still just annoying. Varia was, they basically tried to put some CP back into her Chain Lightning because she was nerfed pretty hard on the Chain Lightning side, and then people started playing full Stormforge Spear builds, like full poke orientated builds, and she was hitting really hard with those. So they're trying to make Varia go back towards that alternating current style of play. I think Varia's okay right now. They nerfed her into the ground last update, so she's still like mid-tier. She used to be like broken tier, now she's kind of mid-tier. But Varia's okay. Like the ultimate in 5v5 can be really good in messy team fights, and in general the Chain Lightning can get a lot of work done, so Varia's still good. She still pushes lanes really well, but she's not as OP as she was before. She's like B/A tier at the moment. That's good because Vox was, yeah, right here. This change here, 20 to 5. Like, Vox would destroy you in lane with the first couple of levels in Resonance. Just because 20 damage plus the CP ratio that he had on his basic attacks, like, that's really obnoxious. Trying to make Vox more single target focused and then gets to scale up in the late game. So what they are trying to say is that they don't want Vox to be a lane bully from level 1. They want that CP Vox to scale up. And that's what CP Vox really should be. He's supposed to be a late game, like, team fight crusher because of those resonance bounces. So the flat nerf to his resonance bounce, especially early game, is much needed because it was very difficult to play against the CP Vox in lane. Especially in mid lane where you had to get so close to the minion wave to make it work. I think this is a good change for Vox. And actually now putting some more focus on his first basic attack means he's going to have a little bit more options in team fights about who he can focus and so on and so forth. Because obviously with CP Vox previously, you just hit the first thing in front of you and you let the resonance bounces do the work. He was a bit obnoxious in the laning phase though. Vox is still good though. CP Vox is still very good. I mean, 15 damage in the late game on your resonance bounce, that's not that big of a deal realistically. And that you've increased your first basic attack power too. You're going to see a balance out where a lot more damage will go on to the first target he hits, but you're still going to have great damage in the late game on those resonance bounces. 15 damage isn't enough to make CP Vox bad. CP Vox is still very good. Let's have a look at item balance. Aegis, shield reduced, metal jacket, armor reduced. Okay, let's start off with these before I move on. I think this is to do two things. They don't want 5v5 to go too long. I think there was a time frame that they wanted 5v5 to be at between 20 and 25 minutes, which is about what 3v3 is at, right? We're playing a mobile game at the end of the day. You don't want to be playing games that go 40 minutes on your mobile because mobile battery life, Wi-Fi connectability. The mobile platform is really supportive of shorter to medium game modes, and I think that's kind of what Vainglory should be doing. If I had it my way, we'd have like League of Legends level games, but I think having shorter game modes increases decision making in that game time, makes action more exciting. In general, I think 20 to 25 minute games are ideal for Vainglory 5v5, and by reducing armor and shielding, what they're doing is just making so that even though you invest in defense, and it's still necessary to invest in defense, it's still going to have the ability where you feel like you're dealing damage to those people that buy a metal jacket, for instance. But this has inadvertently nerfed Bonesaw. I'm wondering if they've actually changed Bonesaw. No. So this is inadvertently nerfed Bonesaw in the sense that Bonesaw takes off percentage max stacks, of armor. By nerfing Metal Jacket, you're inadvertently nerfing the need for Bonesaw. I'd have to do some tests to find out how good Breaking Point at 25 stacks is versus Bonesaw and Critical Strike. But I can tell you from the get-go, this is inadvertently actually nerfed Bonesaw a little bit, because Metal Jacket's armor's had a pretty serious reduction there. There's not much more you can say about defenses being reduced other than you're still going to have to buy an Aegis and a Metal Jacket. You're just not going to get the same level of protection. It's not made them any less necessary. If anything, it's made captains a little bit more maybe push to go for Atlas Pauldrons in a lot of situations over Metal Jacket. You'd go Metal Jacket in the sense when you never thought you were going to land an Atlas Pauldrons. For instance, Finn, unless you land a hook, it's very difficult to get into position to land Atlas Pauldrons, so you'd often go Metal Jacket against something like a Weapon Power Kestrel or a Baron, where they have such good mobility and they do such high burst damage that you just needed the Metal Jacket to tank. It might now be pushing some captains that didn't previously want Atlas Pauldrons towards an Atlas Pauldrons. This is a change that has been reverted from last year, I believe. They took it from 25 to 20. Now it's going back up to 25. It does mean that Breaking Point builds are going to be more viable. The problem that we had with Breaking Point is that it was just outclassed by Critical Strike for quite a long period of time. Like, Critical Strike was really strong. People just, if you didn't build Critical Strike, you weren't doing it right. And there were very few carries that could actually make Breaking Point builds work. Things like Vox, Vox, I mean, it's just basically Vox was like one of the only really viable Breaking Point ranged carries in the game. Back up to 25, it's going to make the Vox Breaking Point build a bit better because you're going to have a little bit longer to kite, you're going to generate a bit more weapon power, but it also means that those carries that would have previously just gone straight Critical Strike might now find some use in going for Breaking Point. It inadvertently buffs people like Rona, it inadvertently buffs people like Blackfeather because they were Breaking Point focused carries. So any carry that previously used a Breaking Point is now going to be stronger on this update, and any carry that has longevity, like a Kiting Vox, a Rona, a Blackfeather, a Cruel, all of those carries are going to get better this update because of Breaking Point buffs. Remember, hero and item changes go hand in hand. It depends what that hero usually builds, and people that built Breaking Point are now going to do even better with Breaking Point. Yeah, nerf Clockwork again. This is the second time they've nerfed it, and I think that's necessary. Like, Clockwork is just a really good item, and especially for people like Celeste. So just nerfing the passive ability cooldown reduction again is just trying to tone down Clockwork to a point. I still think Clockwork's a great item. I still think you'll see it in loads of builds. It just does a little bit of everything too much for it not to be good. Like cooldown reduction, passive ability cooldown reduction, energy regeneration, and CP. Like, that's 4 major CP carry stats in one item, and they're still too good for you not to build Clockwork in your build. There's not many other really good cooldown reduction items for CP carries right now. That if you're not going to build an Aftershock, you're not going to get cooldown reduction for most CP carries. So Clockwork is like the cooldown reduction item. If they diversify it and bring out another cooldown reduction item, then you might see people less sort of reliant on Clockwork. But for people that have long cooldown skills or need to spam skills like Celeste and Scarf and Samuel, you're still going to see Clockwork because it is just the only item that caters to that individual need of having cooldown reduction. Oh, Dragon's Eye, major nerf. Stacks again are up and crystal power per stack are down. So that was stacks from increase from 12. So it now takes 18 seconds to fully stack a Dragon's Eye. That's a long time, like, for a fight. I still think there are certain carries that can make this work, but the rise of Shatterglass is going to come back because the way of comparing Shatterglass to Dragon's Eye was always like, how many stacks on Dragon's Eye does it need for me to get to the point where I am going to be doing more damage than Shatterglass? I'm getting more CP than Shatterglass. That's now, I think, going to be up to, I believe, what's that? 2, 4. It's going to be about 6 seconds until you overtake Shatterglass. That's 6 seconds of fighting before you even come even with Shatterglass. And then you've got 12 seconds left of fighting before you completely eclipse Shatterglass. So this is definitely going to make Shatterglass, I think, a better go-to item for a lot of carries that would have previously gone for Dragon's Eye. I think for Aftershock-based carries who are going to be in fights for longer periods of time, yeah, Dragon's Eye is still good, but I think Shatterglass is now just better in most situations. Oh, they've buffed Infusions. Okay. Wow, okay. So Infusions getting a serious buff is, again, catering towards being able to close out games. I think because Infusions are like closing out and power spike items. People bought Infusions in 3v3 to capitalize on certain power spikes on your levels, or capitalize on certain item spikes, or capitalize at some point in the game. What they're doing now is saying we want that to be more of a thing in 5v5. Like, they're trying to push, I think, people finding the right time to infuse in 5v5, but also by making them better in the late game. As you can see, quite a considerable increase in damage. Oh, wait a second, I didn't read reduced. Boom. So they've reduced the defenses but increased the offense. Okay. Okay, that still lends itself to the same point. That this is again like the nerfs to the defenses in general. Increasing offense and nerfing defense means that this is all about closing games, all about trying to get games to finish quicker. And so then again, these are like finishing items, like really, really high level finishing items now. So if you get an infusion in the late game, massive power spike. Absolutely. Like, even just at level 12, this is basically, you know, half a Sorrow Blade for 500 gold at level 12, plus the attack speed 2, plus a little bit of defense. So for 500 gold investment, you're going to have half a Sorrow Blade plus half a Tornado Trigger, you know, put together almost. It's just great items to have. So they're trying to push offensive capability in the late game by reducing defensive capability, meaning that games are more likely to end. You're going to have more explosive team fights. In general, trying to keep that game time a little bit down. Range increased on Null Wave Gauntlet. That's interesting. Null Wave Gauntlet was always a very niche item pick, and especially now that we've got all those Captain Vision items, I don't see where Null Wave is going to come in unless it's going to be a specific pick, because you now have like 5 heroes and Null Wave Gauntlet is still just a single hero target. It's kind of an anti-captain item. So if you're playing Fortress, or you're playing an aggressive captain designed to shut down the enemy captain, Null Wave Gauntlet is still probably a great item, but because there are 5 heroes, and to be honest, Null Wave only targets 1, and it's a massive investment for a single target item. It's going to be a very niche strategy if you build Null Wave, and it's going to be an aggressive captain designed to play an anti-captain strategy. So only ever build this if you're designing to shut down the enemy captain and you're an aggressive support that can get that range. Slumbering Husk has been buffed. Yeah, well, maybe with the reduction in defenses to the rest of the items, and the burst is going to be going up because defenses are going down. Slumbering Husk might be the item of choice for carries. I still think Aegis is going to be necessary. It's the problem because Reflex Block is too good. Like, do you know what would make Slumbering Husk really good? If they put Reflex Block in it. If they put Reflex Block in Slumbering Husk and maybe just reduced some of the numbers, that would make Slumbering Husk awesome. The problem with Slumbering Husk is that it's always going to occupy a defensive slot that you're usually going to want to keep for Reflex Block. What they're doing here by increasing the fortified life to 2 seconds is it's basically saying that if you do get caught in an ability that you would have reflex block, then we're going to try and tank the damage for you. But in my opinion, I would have just said, why not just have a reflex block and reflex block it, right? So Slumbering Husk is going to be great against burst heroes that you can't do anything to reflex block against, but it's still an item that is going to occupy a defensive slot that would always classically go to Aegis or Metal Jacket depending on what you need. So it's still an outside item that is going to have very few uses because it's only good against certain types of heroes. Spellfire, mortal wounds, and the duration is decreased from 4 to 3. So the spell, is this the Spellfire CP burn duration decreased from 4 to 3? So it's going to do more damage over a shorter period of time, increasing the DPS of Spellfire, plus giving you the ability to have mortal wounds, which is great against pretty much any sustained hero in the game, plus a lot of captains too. Hey, I've been Spellfire's biggest critic, but if you're going to reduce the duration on the Spellfire burn, giving it more DPS, and you're going to give it mortal wounds, this is a genuine counter item that some carries can pick up. The problem is it is still a counter item. It's still an item that will come in late game or will be picked up against very specific heroes. I think it is just outshone by a lot of other items. If you gave it some cooldown reduction, maybe it can contest it could contest the Clockwork spot. Like, if you give it like 20% cooldown reduction, like it might actually contest that Clockwork spot. The problem is that it's just so niche in what it does, and it's still competing with just very good items. But it gives options to CP carries that want to deal with sustain heroes now, meaning that you don't need just a weapon power carry with Poison Shiv to deal with a sustained carry. You can have that now through a CP build path. Okay, Gwen's back, absolutely. It also means that snowball heroes from the jungle or snowball heroes in lane can really make use of this. Yes, maybe even Baron could use this again. You could go Sorrow Blade, Tension Bow, Tornado Trigger, Tyrant's Monocle. That was an old classic build for Baron that I think could work perfectly fine. Definitely going to see Gwen come back though. Gwen Tension Bow is going to be a big lane bully, really early item spike. Gwen is definitely in the meta. Trouble Boot passive is no longer disabled along combat. Oh, that's good, because that was a problem, that if you in lane and you were combating minions and then the enemy ganked you, like, you didn't have that travel speed boost. So this is good. I like that. I like that change up. And Healing Flask has been changed from 30%. Yeah, that Healing Flask was really good, especially in late game, now that it was always given a standard item slot. So basically what happened was, in 3v3 you had to have it in your inventory, so at some point captains who classically built a lot of health would sell off their Healing Flask. Now that it's got its own individual item slot, captains in the late game who have got like 3,000 to 4,000 HP are just healing like a ridiculous amount of HP back because of Healing Flask, and they're just making them very tanky. This is a much needed change, and also means that people are going to be less reliant on it in lane, because obviously you had a really high sustain in lane. It now means lane trades might matter just a little bit more. Any important bug fixes? A Gift of Fire could be used in scout ball. Rip Adagio killing scout cams. And Alpha's termination protocol no longer removes Zilla fortified health, meaning that it's going to be a little bit harder to deal with Alpha when she's in her termination protocol after she goes into her passive, meaning that if you're using her passive properly with termination protocol, you actually get a bit tankier when she goes to reset, which is great, because I think especially when you should be rewarded for self-destructing properly, not just dying and not using your ultimate, so that's fine. All right, that was the update notes. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you soon.